before you got the job with Tony Blair. So is that something you're happy to share with us?
Well, I mean, Tony knew that I'd had a history of alcohol abuse. I'd had a breakdown. He knew all that because we were friends. What he didn't know, because I didn't kind of go around sort of talking about it the whole time, was just exactly what had happened. And, you know, when he asked me to work for him, I was genuinely worried, partly because my family didn't want me to do it. Also, I knew that I'd broken down. I'd cracked up once before, and I thought, well, this pressure's going to be a lot worse, and how do I know I won't do it again? So it was Tony's got very, very good antennae, and I was on holiday in France. He'd asked me to do the job. I said no several times. He then kept at me, and then I said, well, look, I'm going to take a month to think about it. So I went on holiday. I went with Neil and Glenys Kinnet on holiday in France. And he got a vibe. Tony got a vibe. He was over in a different part of France, and he arrived with Cherie, with the kids, with his mother-in-law. Just turned up. And he'd worked out that Fiona and Neil were trying to talk me out of it, which they were. So he tried to talk me back into it. I knew I was going to do it anyway in my heart. His mother-in-law had to go home. Just to get out of this holiday from hell, I said, I'll drive you to the airport. Tony says, I'll go with you. We'll go down to the airport, drop her off at Marseille. I'm driving back, and I thought, right, I'm really going to tell him now. So I went through, I had what I call the conversation that David Cameron and Andy Coulson never had. I told him everything in my past that could be a problem. You know, and there's quite a lot. So when I got around to the breakdown, and I said, look, you know, it was pretty grim, you know, and it could happen again, because it's happened once. And I told him, and I was driving along, and I was kind of just catching his eye in the mirror every now and then. I was looking over. And I got to the bit where I said, and so then I get arrested, I'm in this police cell, and I've taken all my clothes off, and I'm banging my head against the wall. And I've got music over here, I've got a bagpipe band over here, I've got a brass band here, I've got a row in the office going here, I've got a row with Fiona going on the back of my head over here, I've got a television playing at full volume up here, and I'm seeing Tony doing what I would later come to know and love as his Bambi look. He's sort of going, oh. Yeah. But then he said, well, look, I'm not bothered if you're not bothered. And I said, well, what if I'm bothered? And he said, I'm still not bothered. So that was quite a moment.
It's the 25th of January, 2008. And the reason that I do not forget that date is that on the 26th of January, 2008, was to be my daughter's 13th birthday. So picture the scene of what our home is like on the evening of the 25th of January, 2008, when your young girl at midnight is going to go through a rite of passage and become this wonderful teenager. So you can imagine the amount of excitement in the home on the evening of the 25th of January, 2008. And at midnight, on the 25th of January, 2008, I wake up with the most massive of panic attacks. Now, I had never, ever experienced a panic attack in all my life, up until that point. And so you can imagine what goes through my mind. I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And I bump my wife, who's been married to me at that stage for 20-odd years, Debbie, and I say to Deb, I'm about to have a heart attack. And she turns and says, have it. No, she didn't, okay? She didn't. And so she says, why? And I explain. She says, you've got pains in your arms and your chest. And I say, I haven't got any of that. And she just says, get up, walk around the room, take some deep breaths, which I do. And slowly my levels of anxiety begin to subside. I get myself back into bed, but I cannot go back to sleep. And all I can do for the next 7 or 8 hours, from midnight through until about 7:30 the next morning, is procrastinate, ruminate, and catastrophize. I remember getting up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, going into the bathroom. I had the sore on the inside of my mouth, looking in the mirror, getting back into bed, and convincing myself that I now had the beginning of throat cancer. Anyway, cut a long story short, by about 11 o'clock the next morning, I'm still in bed. Debbie has eventually persuaded, you know those alpha male South Africans out there? You know them? Persuaded one of them to just go and see the doctor. And off I go to the doctor, and I have a conversation with the doctor with some very weird questions that get asked of me. And at about midday on the 26th of January 2008, I get diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. Now, my understanding of the word depression up until that point is a little bit like any Arsenal supporters in the room? Any of you? I'm one of them, right? Yeah? So my understanding of the word depression was getting to the end, about a third to go of the season, and turning to my wife and saying, I am so depressed about this Arsenal football side. That's my understanding of the word depression up until the 26th of January, midday 2008. And I get diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. Take 3 months off work, get myself better. After about 3 months, go back to work. 2010, I have a relapse. Nothing as bad as 2008. And then October of 2012, I'm leaving Unilever House on 100 Victoria Embankment. And I'm walking over Blackfriars Bridge down to Waterloo. My telephone goes, and on the end of the phone is my wife. She says, Jeff, I've got terrible news. You can imagine my first thought on my 2 girls, are they okay? And she says, no, they're fine, but your best friend is dead. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Ruby Wax, Stephen Fry, Robin Williams. And that's the sort of person he was. And I lay in bed that night and I thought to myself, you know what? Stigma has just killed my friend.